the 19th Sunday after Pentecost, a brisk October month, the fall of the year 2022. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, "Grant me justice against my opponent." For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out by continually coming." But the original Greek says that he was in fear of her giving him a black eye. And the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says, and will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" Luke 18, verses 1 through 8. Is that you, Fannie? I don't know what got into that black woman from Mississippi in 1968, or in 1967, or in 1966, or in 1965 before that, or 64, or 63. How does she not know that what she fought against could not be defeated? That whole system of political patronage that included some because of the privilege of their color. How does she not know that she had the wrong color, lived in the wrong gender, and even lacked a formal education, even if she had learned to read and write? How does she dare to insist upon a right of voice, a right of seating at the Democratic Convention, after her supporters from the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party had elected her as their delegate? Why did she think that she should expect the legitimacy of her election to receive the acknowledgement it deserved? Well before the Democratic Convention that brought Fannie Lou Hamer to national prominence, she had troubled the political waters in Mississippi often enough that the white power structure intimidated her, frustrated her, threatened her, and even beat her within an inch of her life to force her compliance with a state of affairs in Mississippi that no one could possibly construe as just. Fannie Lou Hamer wanted justice, thirsted, hungered, and yearned for it as a dream unfulfilled. Fannie Lou Hamer never relented, nor did she ever resign herself to accept the back of the hand as a final rebuke of all her efforts. She did not grow faint. She did not give in, and she did not give up. She persisted. Like the widow in Jesus' parable, Fannie Lou Hamer kept pushing the ideal of American democracy. She wept bitter tears over the failure of America to live up to its own creed of liberty and justice for all. In one stunning moment, when she pressed her case before an unjust judge on national television, I might add, she said, and I quote, "If the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off the hooks because our lives be threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings in America?" I can still see her. I can still hear her when this was telecast on television. But for all of that, she never once renounced American democracy as an empty boast, a hollow promise, or a cynical lie. On one occasion, when Mississippi authorities incarcerated Mrs. Hamer along with other civil rights activists, they coerced the black male inmates with promises of stiffer sentences if they failed to rough her up, to rob her of her dignity, and to obliterate her resolve. They beat her with blackjacks, damaging her eyes, her legs, and kidneys, wounds that would remain with her to the end of her days at the age of 59. But she held fast. Fannie Lou Hamer did what she would often do. She repaired to prayer and persisted in her efforts to wrestle our misbegotten democracy into something more akin to justice, even when that justice seemed most remote, illusory, and unobtainable. What I love most particularly about Fannie Lou Hamer's story resounds for all of us who lose heart against formidable odds. She knew her adversary had more power, a greater number of supporters, and all the advantages of a long history of unchecked abuses. She knew her stature, her gender, her color, and her manner of speech offended the hierarchy of racial privilege and male domination. But she persisted just the same, often singing one of the songs of her faith to encourage herself. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Even the lyric of her battle hymn expresses her persistence, repeating her determination to let her light shine. Not once, not twice, nor even 3 times, but 4 times. But I hear someone say that prayer does not guarantee that distressing matters come to happy ends we always seek. Often we find ourselves disappointed that God did not answer as we had hoped. Our child died from cancer, and our persistent prayers did not prevent it. The job I wanted did not pan out, the one that might have turned the tide in all my fortunes. The spouse I loved betrayed me, cheated, and desecrated our marriage, though I prayed ceaselessly for her to come home again. The pandemic ravaged our land and decimated my friends. Some died as I held their hands, praying for their recovery. These scenarios rang with the deafening sound of truth. Who among us can swear that she or he never suffered the silence of God when you made a solemn, sincere entreaty for the Lord of all to correct some horrendous wrong? The wreck of moral conscience that we see let loose upon our land in the present day makes us shudder with fear and trembling that our democracy may not warrant or deserve our struggle to preserve it. I must admit that it shakes me to my core to see the evidence piled as high as the heavens for those guilty of savaging our democracy with insurrections and promises of more to come. My confidence in our institutions has flagged that those responsible for inciting violence in our country will ever have their day in court to hold them accountable for what they have done. If we look at Jesus' parable once more, it cannot escape notice that the unjust judge turns his back again and again on the poor, desolate, and powerless widow. But Jesus offers us her persistence as a model for us in prayer, that we, like her, must persevere in our humble solicitations of God's ear. But this comparison troubles me. Does it not trouble you? Should we look on God as an unjust judge who finally has a change of heart only because we never stopped about pleading for mercy or begging for the right or insisting upon justice? Surely Jesus does not mean to construe God in that way. The unjust judge in the parable provides a ready contrast to God, who hears us the first time, who knows our condition and our plight, and who suffers us to approach whenever the need compels us. But then we find ourselves knotted up in Fannie Lou Hamer's story again. Why did God not provide her restitution or recompense when a doctor in Mississippi rendered her sterile in a medical procedure so routine and so often used against black women that everyone came to refer to it as a Mississippi appendectomy, when in fact what it was a hysterectomy? Why had God not intervened when she and other black protesters were turned away when they attempted to register to vote? Why had God not raised up a storm against the police who chased them down as they beat a hasty retreat from the polls? When the police stopped their bus to arrest the driver and to issue a fine because the bus, as they said, was too yellow. Seriously. I mean, I could go on in this way for hours about Fannie Lou Hamer because her heroism knew no bounds. She did not give up on God, and she refused to give up on America. For ill or good, Fannie Lou Hamer had only one home, one people, and in all of this earth and in the glory to come, she had but one God. She had made her peace with God from the moment she opened her mouth to sing, "Go tell it on the mountain." I think our clue for solving the riddle of God's justice lies in the deep faith Fannie Lou Hamer expressed in song and in action. As Paul says in his letter to the church at Ephesus, we struggle against principalities and wickedness in high places. And unless we have properly armored ourselves, we cannot expect to win this fight. Paul urges us to take the shield of faith with which you will be able to quench all the flaming darts of the evil one. Alas, Paul repeats what Jesus says at the end of his parable. At least he underscores what's necessary. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? Fannie Lou Hamer had faith, more than a mustard seed. She had the faith to move boulders. No, I take that back. She had faith enough to move mountains. Well, upon consideration, that too fails to do her faith justice. She had faith sufficient to move a nation. She stung the nation's conscience. She exposed haughty arrogance as a sin against God because it sinned against God's children. She did it all because she knew God went with her into every battle, that God made the same complaint against an unjust state in an unjust country. She knew that when she spoke against an unjust regime, she spoke with the voice of God, that God wanted to shake up those gripping power for the sake of preserving their own advantage at the expense of the poor, the wretched of the earth, the least of these. She knew that Jesus had declared that as we had done it unto the poor, the minorities, the women, the elderly, the incarcerated, the sick, the lonely, the abandoned, the ignored, and the unloved, we had done it unto him. Fannie Lou Hamer came into this world poor, black, and female. And from time to time in her illustrious career, she had suffered incarceration, loneliness, abandonment, and lovelessness. But her faith told her that Jesus knew it all, had shared it all, her whole experience, that Jesus pleaded alongside her for justice to dawn and for righteousness to rain down from heaven and for all God's people to see it together. God is not the unjust judge. The unjust judge is us. God lives in the widow as God lives in the poor, as God lives in the immigrant, as God lives in the refugee. And God keeps bringing her back day after day. God suffers with her when we scorn her and ignore her petition. We wound God when we wound her and when we turn a deaf ear to her just complaint. But God has blessed us to know the difference between what is just and what is unjust. And God works through us to make justice happen, to bring it into the world, to cultivate it, and to make it flourish like a sacred grove. I pray for the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer to rest on me in this troubled time. I pray to God, and I hear God say, "Is that you, Fannie? Have no fear. Take the first step now. Now, go